Hello, Hockey World. First to Russ with something to say.
So we've talked about tanking on this show many, many times, and we've also heard like the NFL saying like tanking's illegal, which again, kind of makes me giggle because tanking will always happen in every sport. But what isn't allowed in the NFL anymore, when they had their GM meetings and coaches talk, coaches are no longer allowed to say their team's not very good. So like Pete Carroll was asked 100 different times, are you trying to pick up anybody? What do you think is going to happen at quarterback? Because they basically have Drew Lock at quarterback, and they're maybe going to bring back Geno Smith. That's a last place kind of combination there. And maybe they'll draft somebody. But the idea was Pete Carroll and nobody with the Seattle team is allowed to sort of say, hey, we're going to just, start from scratch. We're going to rebuild here because of the amount of money they charge and everything else. So they have to go through the charade. And it's just, to me, I just laughed. It was very good comedy.
It's so true. It is so true. There's plenty to laugh at today. Well, let's get on to the show. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is, let's call it Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. The only reason I know the days of the week is because Kevin's here. Thank you, Kevin, for being here.
I'm Michael Agello, and I have something to say about the NHL's Department of Player Safety.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world and the illegal things that they just don't want to admit are illegal, and the things that they're doing that are wrong, and the things that are just obviously behind the scenes. And Kevin, I'm going to start with you right now because we'll get to that first, okay? Because Kevin wrote an article today about the GMs just don't care about the Kucherov role.
No, they don't. Well, some do. So some of them do, but not enough of them to get anything done. I mean, they talked about only for a half hour based on multiple reports, and they reached a conclusion that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the rule as it is, and they're going to, it's Gary Bettman said it's a perception problem, not a real problem. Although
that's a good take.
Yeah. I found it interesting that Bill Daley confirmed he's already had discussions with the Players Association. So, and they also kept open the possibility of discussing it again in the summer. I don't know what to make of it because
Probably
I think
it's more of a board of governors discussion, to be honest.
Well, but the general managers are the ones that have to live with it. They really needed to, if they think it's not a good deal, they needed to at least make a recommendation. I mean, things get changed for the better sometimes when the general managers make a recommendation.
So the thing about that, Kev, I thought about that, and here's the thing about that, okay? The general managers don't want to get rid of something that gives them flexibility. And this gives them flexibility. It's like asking the accountants, are the tax laws good? You can't really, it's just, you really can't do that. It's like you really can't go to the GMs and get this done because this really has nothing to do with them.
To use that analogy, the accountants have to operate within the laws of the tax code.
Exactly.
So what the general managers are doing, and honestly,
I know it's legal now. I know, Mike. I know.
No, I know. But the real issue here is Nikita Kucherov dancing a jig like he did after the playoffs last year because I stayed out the entire year and came back fresh as a daisy in May for the playoffs.
That isn't the issue. No. They're not going to, make a rule based on somebody's social media post. It irritated you, but I don't think that has.
No, it didn't irritate me because I'm actually in favor of it. But you didn't see this happen when Patrick Kane came back when the whole thing with I can't remember who the guy they got from Arizona who they were able to trade for.
No, it was almost like a big media thing. Like it created, and it was true. $18 million.
Right.
The reason there's a salary cap is they wanted to have an even playing ground, playing surface, and fairness is kind of the motto here. And then if you got one team spending $18 million more, it doesn't seem fair. So. It is a perception problem, but sometimes perception is reality. So,
right. I will say this though, Kev, you did say something, and I do hear these whispers. You said, "Hey, it can be brought up again and talked about again," and I do think it will be brought up again and talked about again. I do.
Right.
Yeah, Anton Vermette was the guy. They were able to trade for Anton Vermette because Kane was on LTIR, and then they brought him back. And we know what's going on with Vegas right now. But they're operating within the system and what you proposed a couple days ago, although being a fine idea, the NHL is never going to adopt a system where money is operating outside the system and giving a waiver for somebody who's an expiring contract. They're never going to do it, Eck. They're never going to do it.
I don't want to get into it again, but it's not operating outside the system. And I talked to owners who told me it's not operating outside the system. It's not.
Right. I think
I'm not operating outside the system.
You're going to bring it up again, Eck.
It's a Larry Bird exemption, Eck. That's what it is.
Just because it didn't get settled at this
point. Oh, no, I'm not. Listen, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about it. I had 2 GMs that I talked to that said they were going to talk about it at the thing, which they didn't, which is fine. And I think I haven't talked to them yet, but they probably didn't, because I do believe that this was probably a board of governors thing. And to be honest, it really makes more sense as a board of governors thing, because it really does play more into the owners than the GM.
When was the last time, if ever, that you ever heard of something that started at the board of governors and got going? It almost always starts at the GM level.
And it kind of did. It kind of did start at the GM thing.
Well, I mean, it didn't really, because all board of governors are going to read as general managers said that they think the system is fundamentally okay, and it's just an aberration of that there are 2 high profile situations that drew attention to the fact that you can find ways to kind of beat the system, but
which means it's dead on arrival, basically.
I don't think it's dead on arrival.
Well, the other issue too, and I thought I've been talking about this for a long time, and Pierre LeBrun also reported it yesterday that it's going to cost them something in order to get this done if they ever want to change it. And that has nothing to do with this issue. That has everything to do with the negotiations that go on as part of the CBA, like all the time. And
that's where my rate
always you have to give up. You have to give up something to get something. So already the Players Association, there's a feeling that they're going to want whatever it is.
Right.
And that was what I was doing with my thing. I was giving them that. I was giving the disability for these players who are,
But that's where it'll end, because the NHL doesn't want to give up anything for this. They think that this is
they'll have to give up something. But if they can give up, if the NHL can give up something that they also like, but they don't have to be like, we love it.
That's why I think it'll happen. I think the meeting will happen again, and I think they're going to think of those kinds of things, and I think they'll at least talk about it one more time. That's
I think they will too. I think they have to. I think this is so. From what I understand, Ken Holland was the one who was most vehement about changing, right, Kevin?
Well,
that is true, and but I was told that there was actually a lot more passion over the 19-year-olds playing in the AHL than there was over this.
Really?
Yeah, Kelly McCrimmon, I guess, made a real impassioned a speech about how we can't allow this to happen. That it could be that the death of
Junior. Well, he's former Brandon GM, so that's why he's.
I mean, his background doesn't change the message, though.
No, but what's interesting? Okay, I get they are trying to protect junior hockey, right? But nobody tries to protect like NCAA hockey.
No.
They never try and protect that. And you know what? NCAA hockey is actually making headway lately because of the good education that a player can get. I think McCrimmon is wrong. I think if a player, this is like the same as the NBA. If a player is ready to play and they have the ability to play in a pro league, why would you stop them?
Well, I think it was benefit. I mean, one positive out of the whole COVID situation in terms of the NHL was the ability of these 18-year-olds to play in the American Hockey League. Now, some of them, I don't think they benefited from, but some did. I mean, Jack Quinn or Quentin Byfield, they benefited. So, to go along with sort of X model here, I wouldn't have a problem with the NHL teams having a waiver on one player that they can play in the American Hockey League as an 18 or 19-year-old, because that's not destroying the Canadian junior system.
No, I agree with you, Mike. I thought the same thing. Like, it's no different than having an underage exemption.
Right.
Like they have in the CHL. If you just said, look, you get one waiver, because some players, it doesn't help them to go back to and play junior. They're already advanced. They're not learning anything. In fact, and Russ can verify this, some players take a step backward when they.
It does happen. I mean, you'll hear me say a lot of times it's never going to hurt a player going back, and 99% of the time it doesn't. But there are those cases where it can.
Yeah, I think it's the exception of the player that really would work better in the AHL, but I think it should happen when it can. I think there's only a few players that actually make more sense in the AHL at that age. But the one you're talking about mainly like first round draft picks, probably. That's really about it, right? Everybody else really should be going back.
Yeah, I mean, and if you can leave it up to the teams by, as Mike said, giving them just one waiver.
Yeah.
And really, NHL teams are sort of operating around this situation. And, me covering the Marlies for as long as I did, you have players who are, either junior players or college players, not college players because they would be turning pro, but, junior players who go in on an ATO at the end of the year, or players coming over from Europe who play in the American Hockey League and then either go back to junior or go back to Europe. And they can do that. Like William Nylander played in the AHL as an 18-year-old. So there are exceptions here, but I don't have a big problem with that. As long I don't think it's devastating.
I mean, okay. Here's my argument, I guess, though. If McCrimmon thinks that it could ruin junior hockey, how come during the lockout it was allowed to happen? Like, why wouldn't they force everybody to go to junior hockey? They didn't. They said, hey, Patrice Bergeron, you're 19 years old. You can play in the AHL this year. Why was it okay then?
Getzlaf and Perry played in Cincinnati. I think they played in the AHL.
But you know what I mean? Like, if it was going to ruin junior hockey, shouldn't all the GMs have gotten together and say, yeah, they've got to go to juniors. We can't let them go to the AHL. Right. But they did.
Well, I think GMs are in favor of it. So
yeah. I think so. He's probably the outlier.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I mean, you don't want to pull all the younger players out of junior because it's a great, feeder system. So just like the NCAA is. Speaking of that, it just changed because I'll forget otherwise. Just had a great discussion with someone this morning who knew a little bit about the youth situation. In Michigan, it's a really hot topic of conversation. The fact that Michigan's trying to win a national championship with a team loaded full of top NHL prospects. And there's been quite a lot of speculation on social media about how many of those guys were going to leave. And there's been estimates anywhere from 6 to 10 on the number of players that will.
I mean, I'm working on an article now. It's 10 for me.
It is 10. But what was interesting,
some of them are seniors too. I mean, I'm counting the seniors.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everybody's counting those. But the discussion I had this morning with the guy who knew a little bit about the Hughes situation, and he told me some stuff. I don't know whether he's speculating or whether he was in the know because it was hard to tell. But he said that Luke Hughes is actually thinking about staying.
I'm surprised at that.
Me too. I was too. But he said the experience that Quinn had there, and the fact that Jack has regretted not going to college, and that he saw the development of Owen Power this year and what it meant for him to stay. So that all those factors weighing in, and even though he's listed as a guy who's for sure going, he thinks he might be the only one who stays. So
I'm going to still keep him on the list of going because I do feel like if they win, his people are going to say, listen, you're better off going because the chances of winning again next year are going to be very slim. You might as well take this chance. I know you like it here, but you've already proven a lot here. And I think that's what will end up happening if he wins. Now, if he loses, then I do think there's a chance. Sure.
Yeah. I would assume that he would go. I mean, he seems like he's ready. Didn't he lead the NCAA in point for defenseman?
Yeah. He had points and goals. He had, I think he has 18 goals now. So, yeah, he looks great. He makes maybe one mistake a game, not much. He's great. His skating is right back to where it was pre-injury. So,
there's obviously a clear path for him at the Devils. There's a clear path. There's plenty of spots from there.
Yeah.
I would have thought, wouldn't you, X, that Jack would have wanted him to get there?
I think Jack wants him there for sure. This is probably just I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it is just a comfort level of him wanting to stay in college. It's possible he's just, I mean, here's a guy who knows he's going to be in the NHL, and he knows that's coming eventually, but maybe he just likes it in college.
Well, I do want to mention one other thing it happens a lot in college football. Doesn't happen as much in hockey, but it's starting to happen. And that is, you could be a fifth-year player in the NCAA if you're a graduate student. And there is a few hockey players now that played in these regionals that are thinking about doing it. There's a few already doing it. And so we might start to see more fifth-year players too, because those guys are like, I like it here. I could try and win another championship. I'm getting, a graduate degree now. And then I could try and work on my pro career, but I'm already, I've got everything here I like. And so I do think that's going to become a bigger trend.
Could it also be a factor with Hughes where the Devils are right now in their development? Like how questionable, like their goaltending situation is bad. They've got some young players, but they're not a fully formed team. And a situation where maybe he waits a year and they're better off when he.
Yeah, most college players though, when they're going to teams, if there's opportunity, the team usually isn't great anyhow.
He knows his brother is going to be there for 8 years, so there's really no rush.
Right. No,
and of course, the bigger fear is always there, like of getting hurt in college.
Getting hurt again would be the big fear. Yeah,
and that's why these guys usually do go to the NHL, because you don't want to risk it.
Yeah, and Russ alluded to this earlier, but how much better can he get if he's not surrounded by players who can play at his level?
Right,
Correct.
Right. He might be the perfect example of why a guy should go to the AHL. Honestly, but
you know what? They won't send him to the AHL because the Devils' AHL situation's a mess, because they switch between Binghamton and playing at the little rinky-dink practice rink next to the Rock, and that's
Russ,
not suitable for like a top prospect in the
that's
AHL.
Their actual arena.
That might be a reason.
Yeah.
That's their stadium.
That's part of it. They're only playing like 30 games at Binghamton.
Okay. It's interesting too, is you're hearing less now. At the beginning of the season, there was a lot of discussion about how they can't believe the Devils took Hughes when Edmondson was available, because Edmondson's really taken off. But now there's nobody saying that anymore.
Nobody's saying it anymore.
Yeah,
there was some word. I wanted to see what he looked like post-injury. Yeah. That's it.
We'll get to the other things about the player things and all that stuff, Mike, in a second. But as far as your player, your issues with them, I get that. But there's also a little bit of a breaking story, and of course we got to mention the passing of Eugene Melnyk.
We talked about it a little bit yesterday.
I'm glad you did, but I want to bring up one, and I think that it's such a complex situation, obviously, with Melnyk. So I'm glad you talked about it yesterday. Then I won't get into that part of it. But there is a story that's coming out today from the French press that next year the Ottawa Senators are slated to play 5 games of their home games in Quebec City.
Yeah, and that's we talked about a little bit about the instability of the Ottawa ownership in the wake of Melnyk's death. And Kev, first there's significant debt there. His daughters or his sister, the family obviously would take, they're the ones who would take over the team, or at this point they could sell it to interests in Ottawa. And I heard Elliot Friedman refer this morning to the fact that the LeBreton Flats, which fell flat on its face previously, that's been sort of revived in Ottawa. But if they don't get a building downtown, Russ and I and Joe Yerdon were talking about this yesterday, Quebec City, with that brand new building with ownership in place, they could very easily buy that team and move them to Quebec City.
Okay.
Well, they could, but I don't think the league would let them do that. Not without, I don't know what Gary Bettman's plan is. Like, he's kind of like Lou Lamoriello. He doesn't let much leak out, but I'm pretty sure it's not letting Ottawa become Quebec City. Like,
well, what if the family wants to sell? If the family wants to sell,
if they want to sell, he's still going to try to keep it in Ottawa. That doesn't mean it won't ever happen.
Even in Canada, like you would keep it in Canada when the other rink's a better situation, just to keep it in Ottawa. Like that to me flies in the face of it would be a better situation.
The NHL is a gate revenue driven league, so it's unlike the NFL. Everything it makes. Right. That's why I told people about people say, well, why would they end up with more teams than the NFL? Well, they end up with more teams because they need the gate revenue to continue to rise. I mean, that's their strength. That the NFL, as we all know, could play to empty stadiums and make money. So they need that.
Like Ottawa's drawing great crowds.
No, they're not. But what if they had? I mean, we do know that a lot of fans were disinterested because they thought that the team didn't have a chance because they didn't think there was enough money in it. So what if there was brand new ownership and they poured money into it? They worked harder to try to get a new arena and they get one done. Maybe these people.
That's the whole thing, Kev. We talked about this yesterday. So tell me, in your experience, what you've heard, because I'll tell you, in the experience that I've heard, getting past the red tape to get this new arena downtown in Ottawa is nearly impossible.
Well, I mean that's what they say, but I mean it always comes down to politics, and if you have the right politicians on your side, it tends to work out. But getting an arena built in Canada, as hard as it is in the U.S. these days, I think it's much worse in Canada.
Right.
So I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe it won't work out, but in my mind, I've always felt that Bettman's vision is we're going to continue to grow this league. We're going to add teams. I'm going to make the teams that we have stable. I mean, that's the only explanation for why he has worked so hard to keep Arizona intact. And we're going to grow this league and make it better. And if you had both Ottawa and Arizona, like Bill Daly's been quoted saying many times, it's low-hanging fruit in Canada. We know it's always going to work there. Yeah. We just got to make sure we have stable ownership and so forth. And I think that's how they feel. They would rather have a team in Ottawa and eventually a team in Quebec City.
Oh, I do have to correct myself. The chat room's right. Last year, the Devils finished out the season playing in Binghamton and also at Newark. But this year, they're playing in Utica. So that was my bad. But they did actually play there last year.
Okay. So, the reality of the situation is, that 5 games in, if they are, and now I know there's reports coming out now. Bruce Garrick's reporting, and someone wrote in the chat room. It's coming out now that these discussions were more about the World Juniors with Quebec and Ottawa, that they weren't going to actually play games there. But I did confirm with the NHL actually that they have discussed about the.
Yeah, Renaud Lavoie reported this too.
Yeah, and that their games are a reality of it. And I think that, and I like Bruce Garrick a lot, but I do know that those discussions were about both. And I know that there's also been talk about the World Cup of Hockey coming to Ottawa too. There's a lot of different discussions going on with the different things that are happening, right? So. But at the end of the day, if they put 5 home games of the Ottawa Senators into Quebec, that's like one of those situations where does that hurt Ottawa's chances as a team? Does that mess them up to lose 5 home games? Does that fair to the fan base? I mean, I also was trying to find out yesterday their actual season ticket base in Ottawa. And I got mixed reports, but they all seem to be that they were less than 5,000 season tickets, right?
No, they've lost a lot of season ticket holders. Yeah. I know people who work in the building. They've lost a lot.
Well,
I mean, the only thing I'll say is once a team starts looking outside for outside revenue to play in other cities, that's a pretty good indication that it's not going great there. And that always to me means they could be in trouble if new ownership wants, if the kids want to sell, and even if Gary Bettman says, okay, but you have to keep it in Ottawa, and then he goes through that cycle, he may not find a good taker for that.
When the ownership and the revenue of the Buffalo Bills was in question years ago, that's when they started selling off a game or two to Toronto, home games, and that was a big question mark. And then Ralph Wilson passed away, and they ended it before he passed away, but then it got sold. But it was purely a money making scam. That's what it was. And honestly, I think, maybe it's reflective of the fact that the Ottawa Senators have a lot of debt, and the fact that they could make money on, selling out a 16 or 17,000 seat arena to a city that wants to prove to the NHL that they're viable. And then that I think that's, to me, okay, unless Ottawa gets their situation straightened out and they start drawing significant in a Canadian market. There are no other Canadian teams, even the hapless Canadians this year are still drawing fans. If the Senators can't draw fans, they need to move, and they need to move someplace where they do draw fans.
Yeah, it just doesn't work like that, though.
I know.
I know.
I wish I could say
we see that with Arizona, so that's definitely true.
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, we've all covered this league for a long time, and just because things have fallen apart because of the death of Melnick doesn't mean they're going to expedite the process that they always follow. Like, we're just a long way. That's the only one point I'm making. I'm not saying it never will happen, but having watched this through the years, it never happens with that level of expediency.
Right.
Like, it just
they're playing in Ottawa next year for sure. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I'm just saying they're I mean, and I don't think it's going to happen within a couple of years. Like, they'll let this play out. They'll see who wants to, buy the team, what can happen with the arena. Like this, a move to Quebec City is not imminent.
The NHL does tend to have that managerial style that I personally hate, but does work for people. That not doing something is doing something. Like sitting back, if they don't do anything at all, they can allow that to play out, and maybe it works out without them doing anything at all, and that's fine.
Well, but here's my issue with this: how long could Gary Bettman keep the family if they wanted to sell away from actually selling it?
He won't. He'll help them try to sell it.
Yeah, he'll find somebody who will want to buy into it.
But let's say they go through a year and they don't have a buyer to keep it in Ottawa, and the family's like, listen, we want to sell this. We want the revenue. We have no interest in running a hockey team anymore.
Well, it'll take a year to sell it, even if they have a buyer.
Right, and they have to, and Russ, they have to get the approval of the league. So that's
I get it.
Now that's what's held over their head.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot of time to get that done, and in the meantime, they'll just stay there. And it'll be interesting to see how that affects. There's a lot of different things that who's going to be running this thing. Like, who's at the is Dorian? I guess kind of takes on a bigger role now. Melnick was definitely a part of player picks and stuff like that. There's no question about it. He had his foot in that.
Luckily that Dorian now won't have to deal with that. So
Anthony
easier for him. You also remember this is the place that hired Pierre.
Anthony LeBlanc is the team president, and wasn't he part of the ownership situation?
Yeah, he'll be. Yes, he's part of the ownership. He was also he was at one time, I think, part of the ownership situation in Arizona too. Ironically enough.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. I think if I'm right, if I have the right person, there is somebody involved in the Ottawa Senators owner situation that was also part owner in Arizona before that. So there's that's another weird. Like, if you want to get conspiracy theorist stuff, there's some interesting things happening there.
Okay, so now Barticus did post something interesting in the chat room. We don't talk about Pierre McGuire a lot because
I was just going to say that.
The scenes there. Okay, go ahead.
Here's what I heard about Pierre McGuire, which makes that even more confusing. Pierre McGuire was definitely a Melnick hiring and not a Dorian hiring.
Yes.
Okay.
So what this means, Russ, is
Dorian's not a big Pierre McGuire fan, apparently.
What this means, Russ, is that the new ownership of the Ottawa Senators are going to be somebody who comes from Shattuck St. Mary's.
Maybe.
But
I got to run, guys. I'm sorry I got this thing with my son, but
okay.
We'll talk to you all tomorrow. Thanks so much for everything. And enjoy the rest of the show, everyone.
Wait a second. Hold on.
Okay.
All right. Well, talk about Mike, talk about the Leafs game, because I know.
We'll start with that, because I'm sure nobody is interested in my complaints about the Department of Player Safety. But
no, I mean, bring that part up. I didn't watch the game. I saw some of that, and so we could talk about that.
Okay, well, we'll finish off with that because I want to get Kevin's input on that. But in terms of being an observer of the Leafs as long as I have, and obviously people who read my column who are Leaf fans, really I can't imagine a team more aggravating to root for, because this is a team that, again, got their ass handed to them by the Montreal Canadiens. Even though they outshot them 51-18. They lost to the worst team in the league, and the Canadiens lose 7-4 to Florida. That's what you're supposed to do to the Habs.
Right.
The Leafs lose to the Habs, and then the next two games they beat Florida and they beat Boston in Boston. Mm-hmm. That inconsistency, that inability to take advantage, the victories over Florida and Boston are accentuated if they beat Montreal, because those 2 points that they lost to Montreal could be the difference. And obviously 11 of 12 points that they lost to Arizona, Montreal, and Buffalo over the last couple months, that is the difference between them having home ice advantage or even finishing in first place in the Atlantic and finishing in the wild card. So, I don't know. I just think that, the game last night was an impressive performance in that they were able to score at will on the Bruins. And Kevin, the one thing about the Bruins, even though they've been probably one of the hottest teams in the leagues right now, and in the league right now, is they do have a rookie goaltender, and Rask, the attempt to bring back Rask and, him now retiring now puts the onus on Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark, and Swayman has been fantastic over the last 6 weeks, but he's unproven in the playoffs. And last night he gave up 6 goals. It was his worst outing, and that has to be a concern for Bruce Cassidy and the Bruins, that they'd be starting a rookie goalie.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you have concern about, but we've seen, sometimes I think inexperienced goalies have a little bit of advantage because the old saying, they don't know what they don't know. Right. So they've never really experienced the pressure that goes into the playoffs. So first time around, and then it's the second time. I mean, we've seen that with young goalies that they do well the first time out, and then once they come back the next season, they go, oh my gosh, that was more than I thought it was going to be. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. But boy, he's really been good this season. That's one of the reasons people said that the Chychrun deal couldn't get done is because Arizona wanted Swayman, and they were just unwilling to give him up.
Now, Russ, on the other side of the goaltending situation, and okay, my shoulder hurts, so I'm not going to pat myself on the back. But at the deadline, on deadline day, on our deadline show, I said the Leafs need to get a goaltender, even if it wasn't Marc-Andre Fleury. And why? Because Jack Campbell at that point was hurt, and we didn't know when he was going to come back. But they said it wasn't a season-ending thing, so he was hurt. Joseph Wall, one of their young goaltenders in the AHL, was hurt. They had Mrazek, who had been hurt twice already in this season, had missed almost 2 months with a groin injury, and Erik Källgren, who was unproven at the NHL level. And then I thought they needed not Fleury, but just an NHL goaltender in case somebody else went down. And lo and behold, last night in the first period, Mrazek went down with the groin injury, and they said he's going to miss some time. And with a month left in the regular season, some time could be almost the rest of the regular season. Now the Leafs are in deep trouble because their goaltending is Erik Källgren, who's played about 6 NHL games. Michael Hutchinson was held out of an AHL game last night, and they played 2 e-bugs, or they had 2 e-bugs on the Marlies bench because they didn't want Hutchinson to get hurt. So those are the only 2 experienced goaltenders with NHL contracts available for the Leafs right now. And Campbell's supposed to be back, but they're one pulled muscle away from being without an experienced goaltender going in the playoffs.
I mean, it's happened to other teams too. There's not much you can do about it now. I mean, again, yes, you didn't want that. I know you wanted it to be done on that day. I get it. But also, it could only have been done on the cheapest of cheap because the Leafs didn't have any cap space. And so that's where Dubas lost out, because whoever he's going to get, they know they're pretty much not going to play unless there's injuries. So, again, I don't think there was a whole list of – I don't think you had a whole list of goaltenders to choose from, Mike. That's my point.
There were 3 or 4 goaltenders that were making under $1 million that they could have traded for, Russ.
Yeah. But, Ken Holland used to tell me all the time when I used to bring this up to him about, that, if you lose your number 1 goalie, I don't care who you are, you're probably going to win anyway. So,
and I said that too. But yeah. I'm just saying that they needed, at least in the interim, based on worst case scenario. And, I always think worst case scenario when it comes to injuries, that they needed somebody who was capable just to step in. And maybe they think Michael Hutchinson's capable. I personally don't. But, now until Campbell comes back, they have no other option to go with Erik Källgren and Michael Hutchinson. Now,
Källgren, listen, if Källgren's the hot hand, Mike, and he wins a bunch of games, they'll ride the hot hand.
Oh, yes. There you go, Russ.
I wanted to acknowledge.
Rubbing your hands with glee at that possibility.
I'm not rubbing my hands with glee.
Yeah,
that's your perception. I did want to acknowledge Austin Matthews because he's got 49 goals now. And if he gets his 50th in like 62, 63, 64 games, that's pretty amazing. Well, I really have to say, as much as I pumped Austin Matthews, and I did, he's even better than I thought he was. And that's kind of hard to say because I gave the most glowing of glowing reports pre-draft, but man.
Yeah, no. I mean, Kev, he's I have to say, because I've been watching the Leafs since I was 5 years old, since the early 70s. And I saw Daryl Sittler, and I saw the window of Doug Gilmour for a couple of years, and I saw Boreas Salming. Austin Matthews is the best Leaf that I've seen in my lifetime. And that, now I didn't see the 60s, the 60s Leafs, so I didn't see Keon in his glory days, but he's as good as anybody.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with on that. He's just been really remarkable, and you've brought this up before, but what I think we all like best about him is he tries to improve himself every season, and he addresses a different part of his game, and he's really become a good defensive forward. I think he's almost beastly now, and I think that's a style of play that like every team in the league is looking for, and he's now playing that, and very, very, very productive. There's no question about it.
Now, I can't tell you how many messages I got in my inbox and in my DMs on Twitter this morning after seeing the response of the NHL Department of Player Safety to Taylor Hall's Will Smith sucker punch on Ilya Lyubushkin last night. And Lyubushkin hit Hall along the boards, clean check, no penalty. Hall gets up and with a behind his back with a right shot to Lyubushkin's jaw, and he left the game and didn't come back, and the Leafs were forced to play with 4 defensemen. It came out as a $5,000 fine by the NHL. And this is the thing. If that was a standalone thing, fine, $5,000 fine. But in the wake of, and this is what the Leaf fan perspective is, in the wake of Spezza getting a 4-game suspension for the retribution on Neil Pionk, for Austin Matthews getting a 2-game suspension for the retribution on Rasmus Dahlin, there was no suspension for the retribution by Taylor Hall on Ilya Lyubushkin. There just doesn't seem to be consistency there, Kevin. And I mean, I know Toronto, some Toronto fans always seem to think that they're being persecuted because the NHL wants to send a message to the Leafs because they're the big market team and everybody else will get the message. Sometimes I think that's just paranoia, but sometimes I buy into it because I don't get it. I really don't get the inconsistency.
It's difficult. It's hard to know. I mean, Dylan Larkin got a game for similar situation where he felt he had been wronged, and in retribution, he sucker punched a player. I'm drawing a blank who it was.
Yeah, I know. I remember it was a couple weeks ago. So, yeah.
No, it was
early in the season.
Yeah, at the beginning of the season.
Okay.
But anyway, he got 1 game as well. Yeah, I mean, supplemental discipline is hard. I get all that, but I do think there has to be at least some sort of measure. I remember when Brendan Shanahan was doing it, he and I had a discussion about whether or not Shea Weber should have got a suspension for a hit against Zetterberg, I think it was. And he said, well, what did you think it was? And I said, I thought it was a game. And he said, yeah, and I thought it was a $5,000 fine. He said, so we're really just haggling over one, just one level or another. And I think most of them are like that. But when a guy doesn't get a suspension when everybody else who's done that has, then you start to question whether or not there is measures of consistency. Like, as long as you're just arguing the difference between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 or whatever, but when you have no suspension versus, 1 or 2 games, well, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it was Matthew Joseph he punched.
I look at it as a 1-gamer because he did it from behind. Like the other player had no idea it was coming. And that's my big issue with it is when you do something like that from behind, then you should get a 1 game. Like $5,000 to Taylor Hall is nothing. Yeah. It's not going to deter him from anything.
No.
But, yeah.
Okay. In scanning around some of the games last night, I mean, the one that I zeroed in on was Calgary and Colorado because that's a potential matchup of, that's a potential Western Conference final matchup. And Nathan McKinnon, just to start off, was missing from that game because he got into a fight in an earlier game, and they believe he may have a broken hand. And that, Kev, with a broken hand, depending on the severity of the injury, that could be something he misses the first round or even the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, depending on how bad it is.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like, you never know. Like, sometimes you can play with a broken hand, and sometimes, like you said, you're out 6 weeks, depending on the severe and if it's displaced and if surgery is needed. And Calgary versus Colorado, like I've been watching both those teams, and this is the first time they've played, right, this season.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. But anyway, I'd been watching Calgary, and I just thought, as dynamic as Colorado is, I think Calgary's the better team, and it certainly didn't prove out to be the case.
Their coach didn't think so. I watched the post game, Kev, and anytime somebody went to ask a question, Daryl Sutter interjected the minute like he knew what the question was going to be and threw his team under the bus. Like, no, this was horrible. And no, this was the worst. And no, yeah. And so what this game meant to him.
No,
he knew if Colorado won this game, then they sort of win the battle of the mind space a little bit. And he acted like it was the 4th game of the Stanley Cup and it was becoming a pivotal series already. And he was very offensive in the sense that he was cordial, but he was wanting to get his messages out there, and he got at least 3 or 4 of them out there to his team.
Well, it's so true. Like, I mean, and I brought this up before, but it does bear repeating. If you go through all the smaller things that we look at as important in the playoffs, being hard to play against, good in faceoffs, all that, Calgary's much better at all those statistically. And just even on the eye test,
right?
But that's not the way it played out.
No.
So that's why we love this sport. It's so
you never know. But I did enjoy watching the post game though, because he was just completely aggravated, and I get it. Like, if you don't have McKinnon in the game for a big portion of the game and you come out losing 2-1 and you see a lot of mistakes, it's frustrating. I get it. So that Colorado frustrated him. Even if it was just Calgary shooting themselves in the foot, whatever.
That was the 3rd time that they've played, the 3rd and final time that they've played this season.
Oh, okay.
They played 3 times in a month. They played.
So they have played 3 times, eh?
Yeah, Calgary
won.
Calgary won the first one 4-3 in overtime. Colorado shut them out 3-0 on the 13th of March. So the 3rd time in a month, and they win 2-1. And I have to say again, after failing to pat myself on the back because of my sore shoulder. Who took with Colorado leading 2-1 late in the 3rd period,
I see where this is going.
With Calgary having the goaltender pulled, who took an absolutely brainless, stupid, moronic penalty that gave the Flames a power play chance in the final minute?
Doesn't matter. They won the game.
Nazem Kadri. He will come back.
They won the game.
Oh, okay, Russ. I can't wait.
In the end, that's what matters. They won the game.
Russ, I can't wait. I can't wait to see the team that spends $8 million on Nazem Kadri.
What will you do if he wins the Stanley Cup? Like, honestly, what will you do?
It'll be in spite of him, not because of him.
How can you say that? He's one of
the top
scorers in the league this year.
Russ, because I have breath in my lungs and independence in my brain. Okay.
Plus, I just recently, within the last 72 hours, lectured a person who called somebody a moron on a Facebook page for a hockey play that he made, and I just got on him for doing that, and now I'm on a podcast where my partner calls it a moronic play.
I will take my chastisement off the air. Thank you very much. Russ, the Rangers again last night against the Penguins, tight game. Shesterkin plays fantastic. They win 3-2. Vetrano.
Yeah,
that acquisition's looking pretty damn good right now.
And Kopp got another point, and Kreider got another goal. And this is something Kevin and I talked about. Like, if there was a team that filled their needs at the deadline, it was this team. And this is the thing. These are the things they were lacking to be looked at as a real cup contender. Like, Eck was calling them a cup contender, in preseason, but I didn't see it. But now I see it because they made these moves. If they didn't make these moves, they wouldn't be in the same spot. But now they're really, when you could beat Pittsburgh in a close game like that, that's a big deal. And actually, so apparently online, I just caught wind of this on Twitter. Henrik Lundqvist was trying to raise money for a charity, and Steve Valiquette bet him that if he didn't raise $100,000, he was going to have to shave his head. And Lundqvist raised 150. So he goes, "Thanks, Ranger fans. I knew you had my back." I couldn't even imagine if Henrik Lundqvist would shave his head, but apparently it was on the table. It was on the table. But as far as this team goes, I mean, they got exactly what they needed. And the funny thing about Andrew Kopp is now, if he does really well and his agent is smart, he could get a good contract out of the Rangers next year because they would move away from Strome and they would sign Kopp. And that would be good for everybody. So this could be a big opportunity for him if he wants to play there.
Now, Russ, if Steve Valiquette tells a G.I. Jane 2 joke, then we're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Even if the Rangers wouldn't have made those trades, I think we would have thought them a contender just based on they would have been a goalie contender. Shesterkin has been so good that.
Could you have picked him past the second round? Like I wouldn't have.
Well, maybe. I mean, it depends on how it would work out and how he looked and everything else. So,
now I can see him getting to the conference final with this group they have.
Well,
yeah, no, I agree with you on that. But I think there was, and I think we all thought they were going to be improved. But like you said, they really now up the ante by adding these postseason players.
And unless there's a dramatic change of fortune right now, this is the first round matchup because Carolina is 5 points ahead of the Rangers and Pittsburgh is 6 points ahead of the Capitals. So right now it looks like it's Rangers-Pittsburgh in the first round. And, that's going to be a really interesting.
That'll be a long series because Pittsburgh will make it a long series, but I can see the Rangers pulling that one out, but it would be a long series, I think.
Yeah, and Kevin, where the flexibility is right now in the East is that 3-team race between Tampa, Toronto, and Boston.
Yeah, geez.
It's, right now Tampa 90, Toronto 89, Boston 87. They've all played the same amount of games, and it's the difference between home ice playing against one of those other teams, or if you fall down to the first wild card, playing either Carolina or Florida. So that race, that's going to go down right to the final game.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we talk about, it's just almost an NHL tradition about teams that, get kind of bored after they win with the regular season. And, I tend to just kind of go, about that. Like I think there is some truth to it. But I've been watching Tampa Bay, and then I just saw them play Detroit, and I think there is something to that. I watched them against the Red Wings, and the Red Wings, and everyone knows how bad their struggles have been. They've given up in the last 16 games. They've given up 7 or more goals, a bunch of times, and they've given up 10 twice, 10 or more twice, first time in 37 years. And they were sort of having their way, playing very well against Tampa Bay, and then. At the end, Tampa said, we really should win this game. And then they, got the tying goal and they won it in overtime. But up until that point, they really did. And they have, they've struggled recently. It's not just against the Red Wings. They haven't played their style. And I think they are a little bit bored, right now. Like they're ready for the playoffs. I think they'll be better once they get in there. But I think there's a little bit to that.
I did want to mention, Mike, in that Flyers Wild game, which I watched the entire game,
right.
Again, the Wild, very impressive. You wouldn't have expected the Flyers to beat them. It was nice to see Morgan Frost get a goal, but Noah Cates had a really good debut, even on a very bad game for the Flyers. He showed that when you get the right kind of college player, like, again, most college forwards are not going to be Jonathan Taves or Trevor Zegras. Most of them are going to be like Noah Cates, where, hey, they're good away from the puck. The guy, he plays physical. He skates well. He can be a little bit of a playmaker. He can be a shutdown guy. And he showed all those things in his first game. And that's, those guys are still very valuable in the NHL because I think Cates can be an NHLer. And, it's a bottom 6 guy, no question. But, again, not everybody can have bottom 6 guys where they're scoring, 15, 20 goals. So if you can't, guys like Cates who could, maybe get you 10 goals but also do all those other little things, those are valuable guys to have. So that's a plus for the Flyers. As far as for the Wild, man, Kaprizov like he probably could have scored 4 goals in this game. Like the way he buzzes when he's a lot like Panarin when Panarin really gets it going. Like, you know how there's games like Panarin, you say, where is he? And then all of a sudden he scores a goal and maybe he gets an assist and all of a sudden he ends up with 2 or 3 points. Kaprizov is similar, but man, when he gets it going in a game and they throw him back out there early, it's a problem for the other team. It doesn't matter who the team is. Like him and Zuccarello, they really get things going. But Greenway looks like he's starting to really wake up too. There was a play when Greenway gets the puck, he's bringing it down the ice. Travis Konechny is trying to make a play on Greenway because he has a step on him, and Greenway basically deposited Konechny in the net along with the puck. Like that's how strong Jordan Greenway is now. So, you know, like most power forwards, it does take a little time, and he's not going to be a 20-goal guy, but he certainly could be a 12, 13-goal guy. And I'll tell you, there was a fight in that game. Of course, Delorier had a fight.
Yeah.
This is a tough team, man. The Minnesota Wild are really well built for this, and Fleury looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, the West last night, so Minnesota won, as you just said, Nashville won, and Dallas won. And if you look at the race right now, I mean, St. Louis is at 81 points. They're only a point behind Nashville. They're in the first wild card. Dallas is at 77 points, and they've got a couple games in hand on everybody. Yeah. Kev, to me, it still comes down to the two teams in the Pacific. LA, from what I heard, Doughty might be out for the year.
Yeah, he could be.
And if that's the case, then, LA is only 2 points ahead of Edmonton. But Edmonton at 79, Dallas is at 77, so they could catch up to them in the wild card. It's Vegas and it's Winnipeg that could make this an extremely tight race. If they stay hot, then Edmonton would be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really wide open. Like, I think it's hard to handicap. The games in hand make it difficult too.
Yeah.
Because we don't. You can just say, well, what if they win half of them? But if a team is playing well, they could win them all, and if they're not, so I think this is going to come right down to it. I wouldn't be shocked in the final weekend. We still don't know. Who's in.
It might come down to whoever wins like their last 3 games in a row or something.
Yeah, no, you're right. And anything could happen there. If no matter what combination you come up with, I can't say, well, you're totally wrong, because who knows,
And just to answer the chat room, Minnesota preseason, I picked them to make the final rather, and I still think they'll be in the Stanley Cup final. I do. I think they're coming out of the West, especially with the moves they made. Like I think they could beat Calgary. I think they could beat anybody that goes against them, honestly.
One thing, because you talked about the effect that the players that the Rangers traded for having a positive effect. I especially last night, and okay, he hasn't scored a point in 4 games, but boy, you can tell the difference that a Giordano makes on Toronto's blue line. Last night, they lost 2 defensemen in the second period. They were down to 4 defensemen, Riley, Brody, Giordano, and Liljegren. And Giordano, he hasn't made a major mistake. He's calm. He's experienced. He's got a young defenseman playing with him. He's sort of calmed him down to the point that Liljegren has looked extremely good playing with him. I mean, Kev, if you want something like that, that's what you want out of a deadline ad, is somebody who just calms things down. They didn't give up a first-round pick for him. I mean, there are a lot of other good ads, but Giordano, for what they gave up, he's exactly what the Leafs needed.
Yeah, and I think you got to factor in the cost when you're assessing how the teams did. Like, Sherratt may help, Florida, but they gave up a lot, to get them. So, I mean, that's why everybody wants depth and why everyone wants experienced guys, just because, as you mentioned, you can come in and do that. And I don't think any of the guys that were moved, it's hard to fault the teams for wanting him. The only thing you can question is how much they paid for him. And in the case of Giordano, I thought the price was right and, gave them what they need. You need stability on that blue line, something they've lacked for a very long time.
Yeah. Russ, one thing before we end the show. I found it hilarious that yesterday during the game, it was like they always show like what notable event happened on this day in hockey history. And the notable event last night was the 21st anniversary of the fan falling into the penalty box in Philadelphia when Ty Domi had squirted him with water. And funny thing was, I've heard like after the fact that like Domi and this guy, not that they're like best friends, but they're friendly. It was simply the glass gave way. He didn't like, but I mean, how nuts that was, because like Kevin Collins was preventing this guy from getting at Domi, and Domi was like mounting. It was just in retrospect, it was hilarious.
In that moment, though, Domi was going to kick the crap out of him.
Well, you didn't know what the hell was going on.
The funny thing about that for me was, and I think I was watching that game, or I remember seeing the replay.
I was watching
that night. Was just the fact the oh shit look from the guy when the glass gave out. Like that was the part where he was this big tough guy, and then he realized he was falling into the lion's den, and the look on his face, it was just like priceless, because it was just like he realized at that point in time he had made a huge mistake.
So Kev, how was that covered at USA Today at that point? Because that was, I mean,
I wish I could remember. To be honest, I remember the incident, but I don't. I don't remember. It's funny when you covered the league for as long as I have. I just had just recently somebody said that they, when John Cooper got hired by Tampa Bay, that when I had reported on the firing of Guy Boucher, that in my second paragraph, I had Cooper as one of the two favorites to get that job. Now, I don't remember that whatsoever, but apparently I had some inkling that he was in the mix. So,
the only thing I can tell you, Mike, is that at the draft, we asked Max Domi about that incident, and of course he laughed about it. He had seen it on YouTube. Like he was proud of his dad for that. Like it was one of those funny things.
Well, think of it. Max Domi was probably 5 years old when that happened.
Right.
It was 200001.
I think it does live on. Like everybody knows.
Yeah. It's hilarious, and for anybody who's interested, go to YouTube, because they have like Joe Bowen and Harry Neal doing the play-by-play, and it was like essentially it was like this guy is going to get his ass kicked by Domi, but then Domi was. I don't think Domi was ever going to. I think Domi was just worried about the fan falling in there.
I don't know.
You think he was going to attack him?
I mean, Mike Milbury attacked somebody with their own shoe and they threw it at him. I think when a player, Dick Butkus, what did he do? He clotheslined the guy that ran on the field. Like Ty Domi, I wouldn't trust him that he wasn't going to do anything.
Well, I mean, Ty Cobb kicked somebody with his spikes.
Yeah.
But the different era. So anyway, all right. Great show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. I'll be up in Toronto, so I'm not sure what time we'll be doing the show, but we'll make sure we put it out there. For the departed Eklund, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.